So my name is Jess, Smiley, and I'm an illustrator and writer living in Utah. Um, my first graphic novel is coming out this fall from Top Shelf Productions. It stars this guy, Harold the vampire. He's a little boy vampire and he loses his teeth, and he kind of runs into this lady named Vermilion, and she's the last witch on Earth, and she's super nasty because she's the last witch. So they kind of butt heads, and this is their story, and it's the first book in a series. It's called Upside Down: A Vampire Tale, and it comes out this fall from Top Shelf Productions. Um, do you want to? I have a couple of Top Shelf books. I can just show you what they've done. Like they did Craig Thompson's Blankets. A lot of people know Blankets. They did Jeffrey Brown's Clumsy. Jeffrey Brown's great. The Owly series. My little boy loves Owly. They do books by James Kochalka, Dan James. He does these wordless comics, which are great. I love them. So they've been like my favorite comic book publisher for probably 10 years or so. So when I finished my book, I decided I had to send it to them, because if I finally finished a graphic novel, this big goal for myself, if I finally did it, then I might as well go all the way and send it to my favorite publisher. So I did, and they totally fell for it, and they're gonna publish it this fall. I'm starting a video series actually on how I made the graphic novel. Everything from coming up with the ideas of what the book was going to be about, to developing the characters, and drawing the book, coloring it, making sure everything's ready for the finished book, and then also submitting it to the publisher and everything like that. So it's a video podcast called The Thinking Cap. So if you're struggling, you're having a rough time with what the projects you're working on, you can put on the thinking cap. So that's coming up. I've got the first drawing here if you want to see of this guy, Harold. Isn't that a cute sketchbook? All those nice pinks and pastels on there. Let's see. Here it is. When was this? August 21st, 2009. So it's this guy right here. That was the first drawing. So I was just drawing some other stuff. My boy was scribbling on the page. I was trying out different brushes and pens, and I just drew a vampire for fun. And I drew my wife as like a cat, and my niece colored in it. And then I decided to draw the little vampire again. I thought it'd be funny if he had cavities, because he's a vampire. So I started drawing like some witch and some bats and like some professor mixing potions, and that's all it took was 3 pages. And then I realized, I could turn this into a story. I could make something out of this little drawing. It was just, I didn't plan on drawing a vampire, like coming up with a story. But then I started using this idea map, so I started saying, okay, what if I have a vampire? What if there are ghosts in it, or scarecrow, or snakes, or, what if this vampire loves candy? So it's extra bad that he loses his teeth. Now he can't chew candy, and he's not a vampire. How terrible would that be? So then I started coming up with the whole story, and I did like a test page of using this new ink brush, and I made like a little copy to see how it would look in print, because I'd never really drawn this way or with that brush before. And I liked it, so I thought, well, I might as well make a story out of it. And I had started, I don't know if you've ever done writing or drawing projects before, but I had started probably 5 or 6 different graphic novels, like over the last, I don't know, 5 years. And I would get working on the rough draft because it was just this awesome idea, and I wanted a rough draft so I knew what the book was going to look like and what the characters were doing and what they were saying. And I would get most of the way finished through a rough draft, and then I'd start getting these other ideas for something totally unrelated that would make a cool book. So I would start on a rough draft for those ideas, like, okay, all right, and then this happens, and draw it out, and I would get, like 70 pages in, like almost done with this rough draft. Then I'd have ideas for another graphic novel, and I'd start that up, hurry and write them down before I forget, and I never finished anything. And I think a lot of writers and artists have like that same problem where we're really good at starting things and we're really good at building worlds, but we're really terrible at saying, okay, this is where the world ends for this book. That's all we're going to tell about this world, because I have to find time to write this and actually make it into a book. So my one goal, so I drew that vampire drawing in 2009 in the end of August, and I had started writing a rough draft, like a rough script of what was going to happen in the book. And at the end of the year, I decided that I was gonna go all the way. I wanted to make this into a book from start to finish. And my one goal for 2010 for myself was to finish that graphic novel, to finish Upside Down. Because otherwise, I mean, that's my passion, is making comics and graphic novels, drawing, writing stories. So if I didn't finish one, I was never going to know what would happen if I did finish. So I decided it was important enough for me that I had to finish. So my one goal for 2010 was finish this vampire graphic novel, and that was it. So I made a plan. January, February, March, I drew the comic, I colored it, I edited it, I revised the whole thing, and I sent it out the top shelf, and they actually wrote back 2 hours later, and they said that they were going to talk with each other and let me know what their decision would be. And the next morning I woke up and checked the email. I could hardly sleep. And I mean, this is my favorite comic book publisher. I have tons of their books. And the next day they said, yeah, we'd like to get your phone number so we could call and start talking about a contract, setting things up to make this book happen. So that's, like, in a nutshell, really quick, how this whole book came together. And it's crazy to think that, what would have happened if I would have finished one of those other graphic novels. Maybe I would have been doing this a while. Maybe they weren't good ideas and I would have finished and they wouldn't have liked it. But they liked this book, and I finished it. I sent them the whole book. Usually they get like 20 finished pages and then they decide where to go from there. But they had the whole book. And then they actually, part 2 of that story, I guess, is that they asked if I had any other ideas for this story about this vampire and this kind of mad scientist and this last witch on Earth and these little bat friends that come into the story, if I had any more ideas for them. I said, well, there are things that I didn't put in the story that I was thinking about using. And they said, well, we'd like to market this as book 1, and we'd like you to think about maybe making a second book. And that was kind of crazy, because it felt really cool to me that not only is it getting published, but now they want to see more, which is awesome. But also kind of a problem, because I wasn't planning on making a second book. So when I made Upside Down, a vampire tale, I thought I was so slick, so clever to put in all these subplots and little parts of their characters that in the end, if you're paying attention to these little things, in the end, everything has its own little conclusion in its own way. So everything kind of gets tied up together in this nice little knot at the end of the book. So it was nice. It felt complete, finished, but now I have to continue that into a second book. So then I started looking for kind of holes in the story, or maybe parts of the story that I didn't talk about enough. And I didn't want to. I decided that if I was going to make a second book, you know, like we've all seen movie sequels that are just awful, or you know, then they make a third movie that's even worse, and then a fourth and a fifth, and then all of a sudden you have like 7 movies in this series, and the first one's incredible. Yeah, you could think of a couple, I'm sure. And I think anyway. So I didn't want it to feel forced. I didn't want it to feel like people like the first one, so I just made a second one. I don't want it to feel like that. I wanted it to feel like there was more story to tell. And so I developed this big old story and found that there were a lot more stories that I could tell. So, so all I'll say, I guess, is that Upside Down: A Vampire Tale is the first book in a series. And I'm working on the second book right now. Monster Coloring Book by Jess Smiley. Monster Coloring Book, and it's a coloring book with monsters in it. And it's 32 pages of monsters, creatures, critters, ghouls and haunts and goblins and all these things that, I don't know, as a kid, like I always wanted to see those kind of in coloring books, but it was usually like cutesy stuff. So these monsters are kind of cute. Like he's not really gonna scare anyone away, but I think it also kind of has this playfulness that someone my age, could color it and have fun with, and maybe share it with their friends just as much as my 4-year-old boy, would love to color it. So that's kind of the idea there. So I'm selling these on Kickstarter right now for $15, and I'm also selling the original drawings. So I'm going to put up each page with all the monsters in it, and you can see them all. And then if there's one page that you think is really cool, then you can buy that original drawing, and then get a coloring book. So that's going to be awesome.